Morning, friends. Here we are, just at dawn, and proposing to do another episode of OBEJournal. This is number 15, 2023. More on spontaneous projection from the waking state. And in the interim, I've just come across an interesting research book by English researcher Paul Beard from 1980. It's called Living On: How Consciousness Continues and Evolves After Death. And he is a researcher, but a very competent and encyclopedic researcher. He quotes many channeled communications and makes a sort of a map of the various stages of the afterlife that souls go through. A map that we're perhaps familiar with from other sources, but still an interesting way of laying it all out. And I thought it'd be fun to read from a little bit of that. This is kind of after the Summerland. He's kind of between the Summerland and the first heaven. He's got it all, divvied up, Winterland, Summerland, first heaven, second heaven. I think even a third heaven. And they're all interesting stages, and they're all labels that people give when they're trying to understand the complexity of the evolution of consciousness after the physical. To return to the ordinary, decent person in the Summerland, we have seen that really, in spite of the lyrical description sometimes given, is an area of limitation. Myers called it Lotus Land or Illusion Land, because it is based on a reconstruction of earth memories of enjoyment and upon an expectation of reward. If a symbol is sought, will describe the state of the man who thinks he has already arrived in heaven, and at such easy cost, an armchair in front of one's own porch would not be a bad image. Woven into this, however, is another somewhat deeper aspect, not based on earth memories, but upon the hopes, longings, and ideals which had lain deep in the traveller's heart, but which he had never been able to express in his outer life, the parts of his nature to which he had brought no fulfillment. This too must now come to expression, and its precise worth will be shown to him in this new, kindly environment in which old earth obstacles do not exist. There is now nothing to stop him, and everything to help him, to give his ideals the expression which had eluded him on earth. But this second phase of the Summerland also falls short of reality. If this is accepted, some of the difficulties in the concept of the Summerland disappear, including the perfectly sound and correct view held by many skeptics that the felicity seemingly described is too easy and has not been earned. So now a man's interior dreams are put to the test by being granted to him. Be careful what you wish for. That's one place where that's definitely true. All his earth wishes come true, or so it seems. At first all is wonder and delight. It seems he has found himself. But this easy conquest made, there's an aftermath of a kind not expected. What he has drawn around him is an idealized form and shares with others, and is limited in this mental world to the actual execution of reality of his imagination, and how much it can give to it. In his uncritical way, he delights in it. After a while, like his own earth nature, it proves to be insufficient. There is more to the human spirit than the possession of such enjoyments. I think a lot of people would dispute that. As the post-mortem Myers says, there is one greater misfortune than the non-realization of the heart's desire, and that is its realization. The purpose of this phase is to bring to an end all these personal emotions and thoughts which were wasted because out of them no spiritual harvest was garnered on earth. He will not be able to carry them with him later on into the more demanding subsequent phases of living, at last, where he will be concerned with his true spiritual harvest, those qualities he did fulfill and so build into a permanent part of his own being. What at first seemed so desirable and satisfying, and of which he may have given descriptions to friends on earth through a medium, now proves to be an illusion. Oh, really? Here's one quote. He quotes from many sources. You will find that the gratification of your desires quickly palls, but at least you have the pleasure of it before it happens. No, it does not last. It is not meant to. You will have it as long as you want it. Nobody will hurry you. You will be sated with it first. The summer land is also a foreshadowing of later surroundings. It is described as a land of sunlight. Here it must be said that the sunlight, the water, the landscape, the moving stream, the woods and hills which are described must not be regarded too literally. Myers found them to be brought about by those he called the wise ones, who create an environment appropriate to their charges, but more skillfully than these could do it for themselves. The environment resembles a pictorial representation, an artist's conception. The landscape, like surroundings, are meaningful images as an artist's design is meaningful. It is like a less obdurate form of nature, not one heartless, witless, as Huysman declares, but somehow imbued with intelligent purpose. Water there is said to bring a deeply vivifying refreshment. Oh, I can vouch for that. Fruits too, unusual fruits are described which can in some way be imbibed in and which produce a sense of vivification. There is no need to eat, but there is no physical body which needs food, though old habits may bring about a sensation of needing food. But there is error used for teaching, even when thought of physical food and the vivification it brings represents a momentary participation in what in essence is a slightly higher level of consciousness. It is this which the summerland apple or peach is likely to produce. Quote, when you first arrive here, however, the routines of eating and drinking and sleeping are too firmly established to be eliminated at one fell swoop. So you think you need to sleep. You sleep for as long as you want. If you think you need to eat, then you eat your fill. There are no excretory organs in our bodies. When I drink water, it just diffuses itself throughout my system, and that's that. In other words, it's converted into energy. If I see a beautiful apple tree with bright red apples on it, I can reach up and pick one off. It has the effect of recharging our batteries. There's a good quote from a doctor a while ago. Here's another interesting quote from a recent arrival. There are things of the same kind as you see on earth, only somewhat different. They are real, but you have a sense that they are only temporary, that they just belong to that first waking stage. Then you find, and it seems very curious and fascinating, that you can change those things by wishing them to change. You can only do it with quite small and unimportant things. But for existence, you can look at a pine needle on the ground where you are sitting and begin to think of it as a real needle, a steel needle, and then it is an ordinary sewing needle, and you can pick it up. You can't change big things. You can't change the whole scene around you. That is because it is not only your scene. It belongs to lots of other spirits too, but you can change any little thing when the change won't affect anybody else. Then you begin to realize that all the things around you are really thought forms, and then it is arranged like that so that you can make a transition easily from material life to spirit life. You learn a great deal simply by finding out what you can change by changing your own thought about it, and what remains unaltered, however you think about. That makes you understand how little belongs to you alone, so that you can do exactly what you like with it individually, and how much belongs to the whole concourse of spirits of which you are a part. Here's another interesting quote. I was a doctor on earth, but I had no use for religion or faith healing, or any of those sentimental emotions. I woke up in a hospital. I had died at home and could not think how I'd got there, but it was a most wonderful place. A doctor came over to me. Oh, we shall be glad to teach you all we know. He sat down beside me, and out of nowhere a diagram appeared showing the organs and arteries of my new body. Similar in shape to the one I knew, but with digestive organs and so on of a much simpler kind. The digestive organs seemed to be on a rotary system. It looked like one large flywheel that drew in from all sides the white and coloured rays, transforming them into energy and life, such as I am now experiencing it. A doctor goes straight to a hospital. Another interesting quote here. Consciousness, it is clear, does not expand at an even rate. It can intensify and then diminish again. Those who have a degree of spiritual maturity, who quickly accept the fact of their death, are at once eager to learn and can experience such a temporary intensification very quickly. Quote, remarkable is the impression of time, which is not measured in the same way as on earth. Thus it seemed to me I had spent at least several months in the Elysian fields, or what I took for them. It was a state of serene bliss, of complete relaxation. In the beginning I was more or less conscious of the presence of familiar faces and loved ones. It seemed to me as though all around me there were large and fresh fields covered with flowers. I was constantly surrounded by this golden haze, but I rather felt things rather than actually saw them. I saw a great many things that were new to me. I walked about, met many an old friend and some new ones, so that I had the impression of having lived here already for a long time. Gradually I was overcome by weariness. I wanted a regenerating bath. When my attention turned toward you again, I realized that this lapse of time, so long and full, corresponded to 3 or 4 terrestrial days. Here's another quote about a doctor. And a doctor here has become so linked up with his work that he cannot resist from exercising his profession. He works chiefly through clairvoyance and is perfectly happy to see his treatments continued. It is now over 50 years that he carries on his work. He has not even taken the time to get interested in anything else. Once I asked him whether he had not certain experiences, pleasant or disagreeable, very different from those on earth. He answered, half surprised, half absent-minded, no. A little more text here. This doctor's unchanged attitude has more than one aspect and is probably not quite as admirable as it sounds. It may hide a deep inability to face up to the other sides of his character, so that in choosing to confine himself to his better and perfectly sincere sides, he is refusing to take the disciplinary path which will also lead him to the wider future which will then become available to him. His work provides service to others, but could well be a refuge from himself, and on that account a more limited service than need be. A respectable life is in itself no passport to spiritual advancement. The doctor, in spite of all his service, may yet lack one part of the root of the matter, which less audible persons quickly gain. Quote, an old man came over here after an earth life that was by no means exemplary. He was a thief who had killed a man during one of his expeditions, and as soon as he arrived here he met his victim. He did not know how to express his sorrow, but the victim had no ill feeling and told him that he was grateful for his release from a wretched earth life. He set to work to teach the old man that he must atone for his bad life, but that the punishment was automatic and not vindictive. After a time, the murderer and his victim became fast friends and made progress together. It is not always the apparently good people who get on quickly over here. Another one. A character states that he lived in the 18th century, naming himself Sir Rupert Benton. He then proceeds to give a description of this past life in its aristocratic setting. Sometime later, many weeks onward, he comes to confess that on earth he had in truth only been the servant, the very envious servant of the real Rupert Benton. We see him finding his slow way, very slow way, toward reality through this impersonation enjoyed and paraded before others. But why is it taken from the 18th century for this casting off to be completed? Why do not others kindly in purpose disillusion him? It is because his fantasy, and this is important, remains his to accept as long as he wills it to. If he prefers to believe it, even if in one part of his being he knows it is otherwise, no one can make him step outside it. Similarly, the doctor can continue his ministrations just as long as it suits him. The two things certain about such illusions are their ultimate disappearance and their owner's inalienable right to continue them meanwhile. Others support very different illusions from that of Sir Rupert Benton. A group of brothers from the Celtic Church of the 9th century, former monks of Lindisfarne, speak of their life in the etheric world. They too have been caught in a dream of their own for a very much longer period. It is a comparatively harmless dream, very much in continuation of their old earth life, which after all was the life they then chose and for which they renounced much else. They tell of an abbey, a duplicate of the one they knew on earth. They tell even of the flocks they believe they still tend, and theirs must be almost the only account where money is spoken of still in active circulation. These brethren look on their life as a loyal and patient waiting for the second coming of Christ. When some of their members leave them, the remainder sorrow at this infidelity, but of course the absentees are really the brethren who have made progress, casting off this enclosing illusion and going on to a wider life. Anyway, endless examples of different souls in their progress or lack of progress there. The musician, composer, singer Nick Drake, who passed in 1974 with 3 fabulous progressive folk albums produced, and not much fame other than a small circle of fans of that type of music. Is now, because of a variety of reasons, not least the least of which is the great transcendent beauty of his music, has experienced a level of almost worldwide fame, and amusingly enough, partly because of a 25-year-old commercial for Volkswagen that used one of his songs, the song Pink Moon, and somehow managed to infiltrate the consciousness of the millennial generation, I believe. And anyway, various things have gone on, and he's now quite famous. And I think the 3rd biography of him has come out, and much talk of it on the internet. And a resurgence, a tribute album has just come out, different things. And the legend is alive. And I communicated with him years ago and found him to be in recovery and doing okay. I mean, when I say years ago, I mean like at least 12, at least if not farther. You know. And when his contemporary in the English folk rock scene, Sandy Denny, died some years later, and I talked to her, I can't exactly remember when, but not last week, a few years ago. She confirmed that she had visited him and he seemed to be doing okay. And people were concerned that his depression would go on and on forever. And it was pretty serious at the time. But I think living either, I can never figure out if he's living with his parents or close to them. He was very tight with them in his younger days, even though he was in London pursuing a career. They took him back home when he started to feel lonely and depressed. And I did get the sense that he had graduated from his earthly troubles, and I tried to communicate that a few times on various levels. And now I sense that he can be accessed. Several times I felt this. So I'm going to project there now. We're walking slowly in woods near where he lives, a rural astral environment, quite similar to the village that he grew up in, Tamworth in Arden. Now almost legendary because he lived there. And we're walking along quietly, as I think previously arranged. He's not, even though I'm doing what seems like a spontaneous projection, I think telepathically it was arranged a little ahead of time. And he's not exactly chattering. But at the same time, we are in some beautiful woods, and I'm just as inclined as he to absorb the atmosphere. And, a walk in the woods, the breeze, the bird chatter, the skittering and scattering of small animals. It's lovely. I ask him if sometimes he thinks this music of the forest is more beautiful than music he could create. And he says, yes, that can be a challenge and a burden, to feel that the music you're going to make, that you cannot help making, is more or less than the harmony of your surroundings in nature. But I'm glad that you make the effort, Nick. It's wonderful that you will continue, given the great accomplishment that you made on Earth. Yeah. He nods, he mutters a little bit in acceptance without any great burst of radiance or pride. He certainly looks well, and having passed in more or less in the prime of life age-wise, there's none of the, at least I don't see any, much of the, going backwards and forwards in growth as old folk do. They go backwards to the prime of life, or young people move onward up to the prime of life, which is, 25 to 30. And he seems similar. So, Nick, I think people really need to know that you're enjoying your afterlife and feeling that it's a very worthwhile extension of your earth life. Oh, yes, indeed it is. And I now see all sorts of purpose in the way it's all laid out. I now see why certain things, certain events, certain processes pushed me through my earth life and onward into this one. We seem to be walking through a part of the woods that has a fair number of, dried leaves on the ground. And the pleasure of the whoosh of the leaves as you pass through them seems to be a part of the experience. And Nick nods and says, "Oh, yes, I love this section of the woods. There's always dry leaves here." Sometimes I will see people on horseback coming through, and always a pleasure to watch them either trot or stroll by. There's plenty of space for everyone. Oh, no, I don't ride the horse myself, he says. I ask, is he familiar with the more recent arrivals of people like John Ranborn and Bert Jansk, his predecessors in English fingerstyle guitar picking? And he says, "Oh, yes. I heard they were playing a couple of club gigs, and I went to watch them. They were just marvelous. Just marvelous. I owe a great deal of debt to them. It's not quite recognized how much I owe on that. I'm praised as an original guitar player with my own tunings and sense of rhythm, and I know perfection of expression, all of which I think is vastly overdone. It was never that good. But if you dig deep, you'll see where I pulled inspiration from Bert and John, particularly John. And I ask if they're happily settled in their new lives, and he says yes, they seem to be, and playing well, and just being creative artists within their tradition, and learning how, as I have, how the tradition extends into here and to some degree emanates from here. I am finding out about lute players as I have been nudged into feeling out my past lives, at least one of which was as a lute player. And I mentioned this to John, and he was not surprised to hear that, although he hadn't fully explored it, although he would like to. And Bert, who is not quite, I don't think, ready to explore that, but will be at some point. the tapestry, the eternal tapestry of folk music in these lands is much greater than we had assumed. I ask, at some point, I ask Nick if he is aware of his continuing fame and the books published about his work. And he goes, I try not to be, but yes, I am aware of that. And Gabrielle comes to visit, and when she's asleep, and we talk, and she brings me up to date, and I'm very grateful for that. The new biography apparently is the best yet, the most detailed. Don't know if I want to read it particularly, but maybe vanity and curiosity will get me to it. Gabrielle is certainly very pleased with it, feels it has accomplished much. And as the keeper of the flame, I'm, grateful to her sisterly care. We are, well connected as souls. Something I might not have said 50 years ago. And I ask after Rodney and Molly, his parents. He goes, yes, my parents in that life. But yes, enjoying their eternal life, as we say, and still involved in musical activities, belonging to, it sounds like choral societies and amateur theatrical stuff. And, singing, of course. And very happy to be close to him, and have been for many years, and live their family life with a minimum of intergenerational stress. That's the vibe I'm getting anyway. And they're all friends. And Nick says, what was he saying? The difficulties of my youth and their attempts to cope with it, God bless their souls for trying, is a prelude to the full performance here. We do live full and lovely lives. There is little that holds us back, not even dark memories. And maybe I should take this chance to thank all those that tolerated my strange behavior and gave the small praise that I needed to keep me going. Friends, college friends, school friends, musical friends, and of course Joe Boyd, who was a great musical father figure to me, and enabled much that was accomplished. All the musicians that played on my records so well, thank you so much for that. And your playing and arranging is a testimony to your commitment and genius, let's say. Nick, people want to know, I'm sort of pushing in here, because we are sort of strolling along very sort of philosophically and quietly. They want to know about, are you composing and playing? And he's saying, yes, there are venues that I can play where people already know of my work, and a goodly number of fans in the day are now living here, and of course new people that like folk music. And Robert Kirby is here, and we can do things with small orchestras, which we have done, and small folk clubs or slightly bigger theaters where a couple of hundred people can enjoy. And we're mixing in some arrangements of my songs with some classical pieces, some Bach, and some Handel, I believe, and it's going rather well. And some of the melancholy of my music seems almost superfluous to the great beauty and serenity of life in the afterlife. But somehow it becomes imbued with the more transcendent beauty of life here. I'm not sure how that happens. Robert Kirby and I have discussed that. We do feel elated playing, a sort of melancholy song. I was tempted to play Black-Eyed Dog more than once, and somebody manifested a black-eyed dog that came trotting into the performance and sort of trotted around. Was it real? Was it manifested? I don't know. It came and happily wandered around as I was singing, and then laughed. I should mention that, a lot of people come and visit here when they're asleep and don't remember. A number of friends and that are still alive, and musicians of my era that are still alive have come, and they're very friendly and happy to see me and tell me about their lives and my continuing fame. And then if they come back again, they don't remember that they've been here before. But one accepts that, and I've played a few of them new songs. I played Sandy Denny a couple of new songs a while back, and she really enjoyed them and joined in a little harmony here and there, as she's wont to do. And there's a fair bit of sitting around strumming guitars. I'm a little more sociable than I used to be. I used to be very sort of bit of a loner and wouldn't say much, but I'm learning how to chat. Chatting is a gift. It's almost like a musical gift as you listen to the rise and fall of voices. Okay, so I thank him for that. Tell him we're running out of time, and I will come back again soon and pat him on the shoulder and say, thank you, Nick. It's very, very, very good of you to give this, and we'll see you later.